Matthew 7 and Luke 6, another parable that's recorded in both places. And of course, you're all familiar with the Vacation Bible School song, right? The wise man built his house on the rock. Rains came tumbling down. A favorite of most children because the foolish man's house goes splash, right? Or crash, whatever noise that you make. But it's not just a children's song, and it's not just for children. The parable of the wise and foolish builder is the strongest and clearest parable and message that Jesus gave on obedience. That includes the surrounding context of the parable, of heeding and listening to his words. And of course, here's the thing, it's not just the fact that it stresses obedience, but it also expresses a claim on the part of Christ that no other preacher or teacher or prophet who has ever lived can claim. That is that he is the only guide. His words are the only guide for men's souls. Peter said in, I believe it was John chapter 6, a great chapter. And at one point, the crowds turned, many of them left him because the fun and games were over. It wasn't just about loaves and fishes anymore. But these people were going to have to make hard decisions about the way they were living and who they were going to follow. And so many of them turned back and followed him no more. And Peter turned and looked at the 12 and said, what? Will you also go away? And of course, Jesus doesn't say, please don't go away. If you're going to go away, I'll change what I'm saying. Right? No, he was more than willing to let everybody turn their back on him if that's what they were going to do. And yet Peter looks at him and says, Lord, what? To whom shall we go? Thou hast the words of eternal life. And that is stressed in this statement that he makes here. That it is God's law that all have to obey the Son. Jesus said it in another way, I am the way, the truth, the life. No man comes to the Father. There is no, and I mean that's a popular idea in our world, right? Whether you're Muslim, or some other world religion, Far Near Eastern religion, or whether you're Oprah Winfrey or whoever. Popular idea in our culture is we're all going to the same place, but we're just all going to get there in different ways. That's not what the Bible teaches, and it's certainly not what Christ claims. And so, he ends the Sermon on the Mount with some pretty demanding statements. And so, it's interesting that there's a lot of contrasts here in chapter 7. You talk about, it talks about the judging issue. And of course, the context of the chapter itself says that you have to judge, right? Because he starts talking about food right after that. Who does he talk about? That you're going to have to make some distinction between false teachers, right? Well, I mean, if there's no such thing as judging, then, that's the rest of the chapter really makes no sense. But notice the very demanding language throughout the chapter. Look at verse 13. You get this contrast between what? A narrow way, straight, and the broad way, right? And then he talks about these false teachers and how do you tell them apart? You get this contrast between trees. Good fruit, bad fruit. Now, look at the immediate context of this parable. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine, whoever hears these sayings of mine, and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. And so it was when Jesus had ended these things that the people were astonished. Notice the reaction. I mean, they understood the import of what he was saying here at the very end of this sermon. I am the standard of authority. And you must listen to me, and you must obey me. Whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them. And the people were astonished, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. Now, it's similar, but there are some differences, some interesting differences in Luke chapter 6. Now, it's not as long a passage. You don't have that long an introduction where he says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord. It's just very short. But look over in Luke chapter 6, verse 46. But it's the same concept. And why do you call me Lord, Lord, and what? Not do the things which I say. Whoever comes to me and hears my sayings and does them, I will show you whom he is like. He is like a man building a house. Now notice the difference in this account and the one in Matthew. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when the flood arose, the stream beat vehemently against that house and could not shake it, for it was founded on the rock. But he who heard and did nothing is like a man who built a house on the earth without a foundation, against which the stream beat vehemently, and immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great. Well, it's interesting, the difference in the accounts. Matthew is writing to what audience? He's writing to what kind of audience? Yeah, a Jewish audience. So the account in Matthew is something that would be unique. What this man did would be very specific to Palestine during that time. Whereas Luke is writing to who? Who's his audience? Yeah, the Greek or the Gentile. Everybody else. And so therefore, his account is a little more universal as far as what this man did. What do I mean by that? Well, you know, in Palestine, you've heard of these dry riverbeds. They call them wadis. And in summer, totally dry, sand. So a guy comes along, and so the emphasis is on the location, right? The guy comes along and foolishly builds his house on a dry riverbed. Well, what's going to happen when the river rains come? I remember a few years ago, even, I think it was over here in Arkansas. It hadn't been that long ago. There was some area over there in the foothills of the mountains where a lot of people do some camping, hiking, maybe some kayaking and other water things on this little river. And it got a huge amount of rain. And this valley just filled with water. Just all of a sudden, several people died. They were just washed away, you know, from their campsites and other places. Couldn't get out. And that's what we're talking about here. Similar. But the rains come, the winter rains, and the next thing you know, this dry riverbed becomes a raging river and washes this man's house away. So people back then, or at least the ones that knew better, not going to build their house in a dry riverbed. They're going to build it up, you know, somewhere else out of the way of the floods. So that's a Palestinian picture that Matthew paints. Luke, however, is a more universal picture, and frankly, it's one we can identify with, right? Because what did this man fail to do? What was his problem? Yeah, he didn't, not a proper foundation. You know, when they build anything of any, of any consequence of size, I know when they're building, overpasses, bridges, all that kind of thing. Generally, what they like to do when they're driving those things in, those pylons into the ground, if possible, what are they trying to get to? They're trying to get to something solid. And so here's a fellow that wasn't concerned about his foundation. And so again, when the weather comes, the river, the water, his house is destroyed just like the man in the riverbed. It's interesting to me too that Jesus, of course, his secular occupation was what? He was a carpenter. I suspect he knew a little bit about house building, proper place to put one. And so it's more than possible, I think, that this obviously was coming from his personal experience. And that's the idea of the parable, right? To take an experience that's well known to the people, to your audience, in order to derive these spiritual truths. So those are the differences in the two. But again, emphasizing the wisdom and the foolishness of these two type of men. But again, what we have to keep in mind is there's no compromise here. There's no coming to terms with Jesus. Regular teachers and preachers, we can teach, and you can counsel, and you can advise. But they're just regular. But with Jesus, it's like one of those contracts at the car dealership, right? Or something like that, or the mortgage company. How many of you go through, when you sign a contract with some big company, how many of you think you got the right just to go through there and start? Well, I don't like this. Well, what are they going to say? If you're negotiating with somebody and they have the stronger bargaining position, they got something you want and you can't get it somewhere else, what are you going to do? You're going to take it. You're going to take it with whatever terms they give you. It's a take it or leave it proposition. It's not a people of equal bargaining power. It's not like one little company and another little company, and they start negotiating a contract on how we're going to do business. It doesn't work that way. When you're a consumer dealing with some large company, you just go in and they throw it all in front of you and you sign. And so it's take it or leave it. And when it comes to spiritual matters and when it comes to how we're to live our lives, that's the way it is with Jesus. And there's no bargaining. When God talks about, both in the Old and New Testament, making a covenant with His people. Well, that's not a two-way bargain. It's not, let's work out a deal. God says, here's the deal. It's our job to take it. We take Him on His terms. And so the only agreement we make with Christ is one of complete submission. So, right. And of course, this isn't new.
We understand this. There's plenty of other passages in the New Testament, right? Luke 8:21, my brother, my mother, and my brothers are those who hear the word of God and what? Do it. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them, John 13:17. You are my friends, John 15:14, if you what? What I command you. And so, it's a take it or leave it proposition, but that's not the only emphasis of this parable. It's not that we just hear the saints. First of all, is that a bad thing? Is hearing the Word of God a bad thing? Obviously not. Hearing is fabulous. If we come here every first day of the week, you hear a sermon, maybe you go to a gospel meeting lectureship, and you talk about, people say, oh, that was a great spiritual feast, because it's a wonderful blessing to be able to hear, and then it lifts you to a higher spiritual plane, and it pierces your conscience, and you resolve to live a better life. So it's great to hear. Yes?
I hope no one misunderstands what I'm about to say, because I'm not trying to place this comment on a level with me or humankind, if you would. But I was telling Pearl recently and again today, one of the things I love so much about our Lord, about Jesus, not just because he was a man who had no sin, leaving for us an example, we should follow his footsteps. Now he has all power in heaven and earth, but most of all because he died on the cross, shed his blood for the remission of our sin. But the one thing that is common to us all, and wouldn't the world be so much better if we could get just one inkling of this? Jesus did not, as my mother used to say, sugarcoat. He told the truth. And therein lies some of the major problems that we have. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think. Sounds good to you. I want you to hear. But do we really do an introspective and tell the truth to one another? That's a problem that we've got.
Well, and I think we talked about that last week, how that, he never did. I mean, when he preached to people in that first century, he talked about the parable of the tower builder and the man with the king with the army. And he's talked about calculating, counting the cost. Well, the whole point of that is that Jesus was not a trickster. He wasn't like, oh, this will all be great. This is easy, and then try to get as many followers as possible, and then all of a sudden they get slammed in the face and weren't expecting something. I mean, he told everybody on the front end, this is what I demand. This is what I expect. And if you follow me and live this way, you should also expect this. Because, look, if this is the way they treat me, then this is the way they're going to treat you. So he was always open and upfront about his intentions, what he stood for, what he expected from us. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, regardless of what you think, doesn't matter to me. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. Regardless of what you think about our current president, one thing that makes him different from the rest of the crowd in Washington is that he'll say what he thinks. Whereas when you listen to the rest of those guys talk, and I don't care what party, Republican or Democrat, you get a lot of what? You get a lot of doublespeak and going around the bush, because if there's one thing that a politician does not want to do, above all things, is to do what? Well, I don't think they mind telling the truth, but it all depends on what. Yeah, the one thing that a politician cannot and must not do and doesn't want to do is offend some group. Because that group might be the difference between what? His re-election. And so, if at all possible, you say everything, I mean, I don't know, it just makes me wonder how many times their speechwriters spend crafting their statements. Just like the statement that came out from the NBA commissioner and the NFL commissioner yesterday. I mean, you read those things, and it had to take several lawyers and speechwriters to write those things just so that it doesn't offend any one person. Jesus never had that problem. As you said, he was going to say what needed to be said, and sometimes, look, don't get me wrong, it's never right to go around intentionally offending people. Just for no reason. I just want to offend somebody today, so I'll just say whatever pops into my head, whatever comes out of my mouth. That's never right. But sometimes things have to be said, and sometimes In fact, not a lot of times, the person who is offended is the one that needs to be asking themselves, why am I offended? And certainly, if Jesus says anything that offends you or somebody else, then I can go ahead and tell you who's on the wrong end of that. The person who was offended needs to get over it. If Jesus said it, if God says it. So, you're right. Sometimes you just, and we're scared, you know, all the time. Because somebody's going to think this of me or call me this. I don't want to be called that. And I certainly don't want anybody to think I'm intolerant. That is apparently the only sin you could commit in this country, is to be perceived to be intolerant of anything, whether it's homosexuality or whatever it is. No matter what the sin, no matter what the craziness is, the only thing that anybody can do wrong anymore in this country is to be called intolerant of something. You got me off. See what you did?
I just believe, and I have no empirical evidence to this, other than my umpteen years of living in this world, is that parents need to quit lying to their children. Children need to quit lying to parents. Parents don't want to offend their children.
Yeah,
So
that's
we
right.
grow up in a world thinking it is idealistic. And we don't live in an idealistic world. There's going to be some hurt. We've got to tell our children the truth. And I still say to my children, well, you may not like me, but I can tell you one thing, at the end of the day, when I'm gone, you'll be able to say, Daddy never lied to me. He told me the truth. Whether I like it or not. And I'm committed to that.
Well, it's a fundamental, certainly that's one of the fundamental issues of our time is the total abdication of parenting. Children just raising themselves. My wife, of course, teaches 3-year-olds. And parents, now these are 3-year-olds, that apparently call their own shots at home. Because she comes home, and the parents cannot believe that their kids come to school, the teachers require them to bring something healthy to eat, and the parent will say, they won't eat this, they never eat this. And the teachers tell them, you know, eat your lunch, and they eat it. Parents are flabbergasted, you know, that these children are eating something just because an adult told them to. I think she said she's got a child that eats Fritos for breakfast. Because the parent doesn't want to be the parent. So you can't eat Fritos for breakfast. So you're right about that. Well, let's get back to this. He says, look, hearing is great. We've established that. We love to hear the Word of God. But that blessing of hearing the Word of God can actually morph itself into condemnation if we fail to do what? We sit there and we hear and we hear and we hear and we hear, but we don't do it. And so the question we ask ourselves is, if I know what I'm supposed to do, and I've heard it over and over and over again, why don't I do it? Let's ask that question. Because we all have that problem. There's not a person in this room that has that problem, or hasn't dealt with that problem. And I hear this same thing over and over and over again, and I know what I'm supposed to do, or I know what I need to do, and I don't do it. So, what are some reasons for that? And these are not that earth-shattering, but if you think about it, they're pretty obvious. If you know what to do, let's say you're sitting here on Sunday morning and whatever, here in the service. The preacher delivers a powerful sermon on, we need to be out doing this, whatever it is. You need to be out. You need to check in on those that weren't here, those that are delinquent. You need to talk to your friends and neighbors about Jesus. You need to visit those, see what you can do to help those of our number, maybe shut in, maybe going through some time of sickness. So you hear it. What would be the number one remedy probably for not doing that, if I were to do that? When I left that day, after hearing it, that's it. That's the number one reason why we don't do stuff, is that I don't do it immediately. I don't do it right then. That is it. That's the number one reason on any good thing in life that I know I ought to be doing. The number one reason that I don't do it is that when I think about it and it's on my mind that I need to do this. Maybe I've been somewhere and I've been exhorted to do it, or maybe I'm just out and about going through my day and it hits me in the, it comes across my mind. I need to do this. The number one reason I don't do it is because I don't do it right then. That's the number one reason.
We've all got busy.
We procrastinate. Yeah, I want to do this. I'm going to do this, but I can't do it now, or I can't do it today. But what happens is, let's say it's something that I thought about or I heard that I ought to be doing on Sunday. I don't do it on Sunday. I don't do it on Monday. Next thing you know, Tuesday and Wednesday come, and that inclination and that urging and that good idea that I had to do it, what happens by the middle of the week? Yeah, it's just kind of, my motivation has dropped off. And so next thing you know, I've had another unproductive week when it comes to the kingdom of God and spiritual matters. So really, probably the most important thing is when I see something that needs to be done, if at all possible, I need to do it right then, right? Because see, that's, and look, think about that when it comes to obeying the gospel. Isn't that what preachers say all the time? If the preacher, if there's somebody sitting out here that you know is not a Christian, and what happens? The preacher delivers a powerful lesson on obeying the gospel, and what is everybody doing? We know that guy over there is not a Christian, right? We know it. Is he going to step out and do it today? He doesn't. And he or she does that week after week after. And maybe at first, when they heard it, the emotion built up in them, and they're like, man, I need to do this, but for whatever reason, they just couldn't, get their body going in that direction. So after he hears it over and over and over again, week after week after week, he or she is not a Christian, and they don't obey, it's easier, right? We suppress that emotion and that desire, our inner urgings, and so it just makes it easier every time. And even psychiatrists or psychologists will tell you that that's a dangerous thing, to repeatedly feel an emotion, feel an urging to do something, and just never actually do it, because the likelihood is you never will do it, right? I mean, how many times have I heard people call, I'll just try to relate this to something else. People will call, people will walk, I'll be talking to somebody and they'll say, boy, I need to get in there and get a will done. How many times have y'all said that? Boy, I know I really need to get that will done. And I'm not doing this for business. I'm just saying, this is what I hear all the time. I know I need to get in there and get that done. And then I'll see that person about in 6 months. Well, I know I need to get that done. They keep saying that. Well, again, I can't help it. I always think of that Andy Griffith episode. With the, I think it's the traveling salesman or something. His car broke down on Sunday in Mayberry, and there's nothing open on Sunday. That's back in the days of blue sky laws. And, nothing was open. You didn't do anything. They all went to church. They all ate. Aunt Bee fixed this huge Sunday dinner. They're all stuffed. And now what are they doing? They're sitting on the front porch, taking it easy. Maybe Andy's strumming his guitar. And this salesman who's from the big city, who's always in a hurry, his car's not going to get fixed on Sunday. Wally or Gomer or whoever's not going to do it. And he's just going crazy because these people are sitting around doing nothing. And Barney's sitting there and he's saying, well, you know what I think I'm going to do? gonna get up, go down to such a, get a bottle of pop, go over to Thelma. Then they sit there about 5 minutes and nothing happens. And then Barney says it again. Well, I think I'll get up, go get a bottle of pop, go down, see, go over to see Thelma. And finally that guy just can't take it anymore. And he just says, well, go on, do it. And Barney says, what? He says, get up, get a bottle of pop, go to Thelma Lou's. And Barney just gets up and says, oh, okay then. It'll be that way. And that's kind of the way we are. You know, it's just easy. We say we're going to do something, but, we got to put one foot in front of the other. Because as great as that urging and that inclination, that emotion is, it's not the substitute for action. And so, you got to do it. You got to do it when you feel the urge or you get the encouragement to do it. That initial step. Somebody wrote, I don't know, I've never written a book, but they say the hardest thing about writing a book is, well, that's probably the same as writing a paper for college or whatever else. What's the hardest thing, for a novelist to do? Write the first sentence. Once they get that, man, it just all comes together and just starts rushing in. But it's getting started. Once you get started, then kind of downhill from there. Oh, y'all got that disease in the school? Yeah, I remember, and it's funny you say that because I can remember BJ when he took over as director, and they had these weeks called Research Week. Well, the idea was the students would get like a week to work on their research plan. Well, it's like BJ said. The ones who are going to do their research paper, time. They're already working on it anyway. They're going to do it. Now, you give somebody that's going to procrastinate and put it off to the last minute a week to do it, is he going to do it that week? He'll wait till the end of the week. He'll play around and do whatever he's going to do. And then he'll do it. He's going to wait till the last minute anyway. So BJ's kind of like, these research weeks are a waste of time. We're going to cut them down and do something else. Because the good students are going to do their papers and the procrastinators are going to wait till the last minute anyway. Yeah, it's a common disease, common affliction, I guess you might say. So, getting started, that's the key. What else? What's another reason we fail to do the sayings of Jesus, actually put it into practice or action? And this is a big one too, especially as somebody mentioned in our busy world, and we're busy, everybody's busy, right? So when you have to do something, it's not in your normal schedule, church, fellow brother, sister, stranger, what does that call? We're being what? As far as our schedule is concerned, we're being inconvenient. It's just inconvenient. Sister so-and-so needs a ride to church. And we've all had this experience. What's the first thing that pops into your head as far as whether or not I can pick up Sister so-and-so at church?
Well, I have to leave earlier.
Yeah, but don't I first have to think, well, is Sister so-and-so, now is that on the way to church? Or do I have to drive what? Past the church building or out of the way, right? Because if it's on the way, it's not that big a deal. I'll pick up Sister so-and-so and do my good deed for the day because that's on the way.
But even worse than that, when I get there, he or she is not going to be ready. I got to sit one.
That's right. But inconvenience. We may have to use some of our time we want to use for something else. We may have to use our money that we want to use for something else. We just don't want to be inconvenienced. We'll obey the words of Christ when it's convenient, pleasant. But I like what one commentator said. We sometimes forget that Christ's mission on earth was not to make it easy for us. It was just to save us. Okay. He didn't come saying, I came to give you, I came to give you life that you could live on Easy Street. I mean, you don't read that in the gospel. In fact, you read just the opposite. I came to, bring a sword. People are, there's going to be, you're going to have problems and issues just because you do follow me. So he didn't come to make it easy for us. And the Christian life it's a religion of discipline, self-discipline, self-control, and it is a religion of duty. And I know some people don't like to talk in those terms, but we do have a duty to the Lord. And some people think, well, when you start talking about duty, that makes it sound what? It's kind of drudgery, But let me tell you, anything worthwhile in life that we accomplish is generally out of duty. If I'm a husband or you're a wife, you have a duty. You have certain duties to your spouse that you need to fulfill. If I'm a parent, I have certain duties to my children. My children have duties to me. If you work for an employer, what? You have a duty to give him, your best, work hard, not to steal from him, Look out for his best interests since he's paying you. We all have duties. And the Christian life is a life of duty. So, inconvenience, we have to be careful. We don't act immediately. We don't act on it at once. And then two, we're a little concerned about being inconvenienced. So those are two problems. What's another reason why we don't always do what we know we should be doing and what he tells us to do? Yeah, laziness, I guess. You could throw that in. And that's almost like the inconvenience. That could be linked to that a little bit.
Could be like Naaman. It wasn't what we expected.
Yeah, but again, that comes back to, he's already told us what to expect. He said, look, this is what I expect of you, so get out there and do it. Talking about that inconvenience thing, and him not coming to make it easy on us and all that kind of stuff, coming to save us, what does it say about him in Hebrews 12:2? What did he do? It said something about for the joy that was set before him, what did he do? Endured the cross, despised the shame. So the bottom line is, when I talk about duty, what I mean is the Christian life demands some effort. And here's the thing about it. And it kind of runs into my next thing. When we start talking about effort, we also have to look at the results. What do we get out of it? And that's what we're going to talk about next. Let me mention this, and this is not the only place that Jesus talks about doing as opposed to just hearing. James said what? James chapter 1. Be ye what? Yeah, be doers of the word, not hearers only. The third one we're going to call the failure to, or the inability. This is by far one of the biggest problems in the world. The inability to take the long view, if you will. The inability to look into the future and say, okay, let's consider the outcome of my actions or inaction. Most people are going to take what view in life? Is what he just said. Yeah, the short term, the instant gratification. We're constantly, look, in life we're always confronted with two choices. What's good for the moment. On the other hand, what's good in the long run. And unfortunately, what's good in the long run is generally more demanding than what's good for the moment. You say, what do you mean by that? Well, take it at any example you want. I'm a student in school. Now, I know I got a test at the end of the week. It's just the first one. So if I'm taking the long view, what am I going to do? Or I know I got one at the end of the semester, whatever. But what am I going to do if I'm taking the long view? Well, I'm going to prepare properly and not just at the last minute. I'm going to prepare on a daily basis. If it's that week, if it's a semester, on a weekly basis. But I'm going to spend some time along the way preparing. On the other hand, if I'm taking the short view, what's easy, what's good for the moment, as soon as the first person knocks on my door and says, let's go get pizza, or let's go shoot basketball, or let's go do this, or let's go do that, then invariably a lot of people, in fact the majority of people say what? Let's go. Forget this, I'll do that later. It's always easier to do that rather than doing what's good in the long term. And so we see that all the time. The same for the athlete. If the athlete or the team wants to have a good season, they've got to prepare. And that's hard. Or he can say, no, I'm not going to work out tonight. I'm just going to go home and eat pizza and drink beer and watch TV. Now, you could do that. That's not going to show up well on the athletic field. What you say, well, what's your point? Well, usually when we take the long view of things and do what we ought to be doing, it's harder, but the reward is sweeter. There's greater achievement involved. If I study like I ought, I make better grades. If the athlete prepares like he ought to, doesn't shun his responsibilities and go for something quick, he's going to win. It's the same thing in life. What am I looking toward? What is most of the world not ready for? And won't be ready for when it comes. There is always a test. Did you know that? We're going to leave it here. There is always a time for testing in every endeavor of life. And if you look at these two parables, what was the time of testing? What happened? Well, when the water came, one house stood and one didn't. There's always a time of testing. Right? Storm comes. There's always a test. 2 Corinthians 5:10 says, we must all what? Appear before the judgment seat of Christ. We can receive in our bodies what we've done, whether give an account, receive what we've done, whether good or bad. There's always a final account. There's always a final test. In this parable, one guy passed the test, one didn't. Because one was a hearer and a doer. He heard the saying of Jesus and he did it. All right. That's enough. We're going to talk next week, and maybe one more week after that, on a couple of passages dealing with final judgment. We're going to look at Matthew 25.